Everybody online here, it's okay?
I can.
The head's nodding.
Okay, good. I will, since we don't have a proper chairperson, I will open the meeting for the Budget Committee, Tuesday, May 5th. And approval of the agenda.
So moved.
You do.
Seconded.
There you go.
All in favor of the agenda?
Yes.
Okay. The first order of business is to appoint a chair, a vice chair. So, do we have any nominees? Volunteers, otherwise I'm going to start pointing fingers.
I see Phyllis ducking down.
Yeah,
We see you, Phyllis.
yeah.
Let's see. Sharon, would you be willing to be the chairman?
I thought you were talking about Phyllis.
I'm not there, so
With Phyllis?
Not getting difference. Yeah, that doesn't.
I think it needs to be somebody that's there physically. I think
Well,
Sharon would be great.
That sounds like a nomination to me.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Okay, then.
Will Sharon accept it?
Phyllis, would you be willing to do the vice chair position? Just in case?
Okay, sure.
Okay.
We need to have a formal motion.
Yeah, we need to.
Do. But we have two positions. So either join them or make two separate motions.
I move that Sharon Clyde be the chairman of the Budget Committee.
Seconded.
And I'll
Other-
second that.
Okay. Roll call on this or just
Just all in favor.
all in favor? Yes.
Aye.
Any opposed?
There you go.
And a nomination for the vice chair.
I move that Phyllis Berndt be vice chair of the City Budget Committee.
Second.
Okay. Other nominations? So we will, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Done. I will hand over the task of leading this glorious group to Sharon.
Okay, then the next item is the consideration of the minutes from our Budget Committee meeting on May 15th and on March 10th of May 15th of 2020 and March 10 of 2021. Anybody have any corrections or additions?
Move we approve the consent calendar.
Second?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any other questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Any opposed?
Good.
Okay, then order of business, we'll have a public hearing. And it's like shared revenues, public comment, the uses. Is that when we open it up to?
Sharon, you have a script,
Now, where's the script?
last page of your agenda.
Almost
The
blessed.
very last page. in your- And that will allow you to open up the public hearing.
Public hearing, okay. Okay. The public hearing of state shared revenues. State law requires that all cities participating in state shared revenue program conduct a public hearing before the budget committee in order to take public comment on the possible use of the funds. The public notice of the scheduled hearing was posted in the Astorian on April 24th, 2021. The proposed budget includes estimated revenue from state shared revenues in the amount of $212,701. The attached spreadsheet shows the breakdown by fund. And that opens the meeting, the public hearing.
Read the rest.
Yeah, go to the very last page, one with B.
That was the staff report.
Okay,
Very, very last page.
okay, sorry. The City of Cannon Beach Budget Committee, state, May 5th, 2021, state revenue sharing. At this time pursuant to ORS 221.770, I will open the public hearing in order to give the citizens of Cannon Beach the opportunity to comment on the use of state revenue sharing funds in the City of Cannon Beach's budget for fiscal year 2021. Excuse me, 21-2022. Staff, please present your report. And is there any, you do your report first and then I'll do, yeah. Okay, slow down, Sharon. Okay.
Doing fine.
You got this. You do, you've got it, totally. Okay.
It was nothing like having something thrown on you, so.
Okay, my staff report is attached and you can see a list of the state new estimates that staff has prepared. They consist of gas taxes, highway fund, disbursement, liquor tax, cigarette tax, marijuana tax, and state revenue sharing, which is derived from liquor taxes. The general fund portion is $80,740. The road fund portion is $131,962 for a total estimated revenue of $212,701. And I don't have anything else to say.
Is there any member of the public wishing to comment on the proposed use of the state revenue sharing for fiscal year 2021-2022?
I did not receive any requests to speak.
And Madam Chair, I don't see anybody on the list that's not associated with the board. I don't know if there is any public to comment.
If there's no further discussion, I'll close the public hearing at this time. Okay, help me out here. So the number 3 is okay, the public comment. That's a separate one, for that was public.
That could be on any topic.
Oh, okay,
If the public was here. and they would speak.
so do I have a script for that one?
No,
That's just,
no, it's just general public.
you
comment.
just, okay. Okay, so do we have any public comment for the budget?
Apparently not.
And again, we have no members of the public attending, and the city recorder said she did not receive any written comments prior to the meeting.
Great, okay. Now we're on to the budget message. That's you. Are you Bruce?
Yeah, hand it
No,
off
I
there.
was just waiting for you to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, no, you're doing fine. I mean, and you can thank Sam for just heading.
I will.
This,
I will.
I'm gonna pay for that a lot.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Staff is pleased to present the proposed budget for fiscal year 21-22. Oregon Budget Law, ORS 294.39, requires a budget message to be prepared by the budget officer, delivered at the first meeting of the Budget Committee. The purpose of the budget message is to describe financial policies and assumptions of the coming fiscal year and explain any major changes in financial policy or the level of resources / revenues and requirements / expenditures of the preceding fiscal year. As required by law, the budget is balanced and proposes a spending plan for the coming year based on projected resources and operational needs. Just some comments on the year that we just went through. Some of you recall when we sat down as a committee the last time, things were looking quite dire. And so we adopted a very limited budget. We were very conservative because we thought that, and boy, were we wrong, but we didn't think anybody would be traveling during the pandemic. What's happened is that everybody that I'm not going to stay at home if my kids can be in school and if I can be working from the beach. And so we had a very strong year as opposed to the year that we had projected. But all in all, it's always good to be conservative in a situation like that. So we had very strong year in terms of tourism lodging tax collections. As a matter of fact, we were probably in our third quarter of record collections. However, that good fortune did not translate to all businesses and especially to restaurants because of the restrictions that were put on as far as the ability to seat people, et cetera. So they're still having a little bit of a harder time, but from a lodging standpoint, we did bring in a lot of revenue. Over the past 12 months, staff has been working to put the city in a position of being able to tackle major capital projects. We're taking advantage of extremely favorable financing environment and to address aging infrastructure and facilities. Project types include water supply resiliency. Main emphasis of this project is to replace the fragile and aged asbestos concrete water lines and other system components that come down from the springs down to the city's water distribution system. Current conditions of these parts of the water system are such that they are unlikely to survive a small to medium level seismic event. And in this location of the system, if any component fails, no one has water. So that's probably the most important location within our system. We're also trying to increase the reliability of the wastewater system components, especially our lift stations. The wastewater system moves sewage collected in the city to the wastewater treatment plant. Even if a major component system fails, sewage continues to move. The system reliability is critical in terms of environmental protection, human health, and quality of life. We're continuing looking into a resilient city hall police station that would be located out of the tsunami zone. This building is approximately 70 years old and started out as a lumber yard. The critical systems that we have to respond to emergencies located in this facility, which is not expected to withstand a small to medium seismic event. The staff's ability to take care of the citizens of the city is extremely limited. That is the reason for us to be trying to get that particular facility built. We're also working on the revitalization of the Cannon Beach Elementary School property. We acquired the property on July 1st, 2020. The long-term plan is to create a facility that will be enjoyed by residents and visitors alike. To fund these projects, the city has applied for over $30 million in infrastructure and resiliency projects through the American Rescue Plan. We've not heard back from that. That one is operates at the state level, and they will be making the decisions on the allocations. Staff has been very successful in getting low interest loans for water projects from Business Oregon. I have to commend Jennifer and Karen. And now we have Kelsey working on it too, as well as the staff of the finance department. We've gotten low interest loans as low as 1% for 30 to 40 years. And some include principal forgiveness of up to $500,000. Those are the ones that we are pursuing. Also low interest loans for wastewater products from the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. Those don't have the loan forgiveness, but they have a longer timeframe for repayment. And then there are infrastructure project financing opportunities being discussed in Congress. We're watching those closely and we'll be trying to follow those. What is happening now is similar to what occurred with the Great Recession. And that's that they want to use construction of infrastructure as a mechanism to stimulate the economy. And so all of a sudden they're turning around and saying, does anybody have a shovel-ready project? And so Karen Labonte, our Public Works Director, has been working to get as many of our projects shovel-ready as we can so that we can raise our hand and say we're ready. The council has been very in helping us to make sure we had the funding to pursue the shovel-ready status. With these loans, we're going to have to pay them back. So the sources of funds would be utility rates. And there's an ordinance coming to council in June that would make rates effective, that would pay back the loans that we've already undertaken. And so those rates would be effective July 1st. Property taxes in terms of is a possibility for funding a city hall. It could be funded through property taxes. It would require a referral, which is in my terms, it was a referendum, but essentially a vote of the people to tax themselves for a particular purpose. Increased TLT collections. That is an option that the city has to undertake. And then also there's been discussion about a food and beverage tax. So that is how we would plan to fund the paying the debt service. There's some complications within the budget that you're going to see, that there are functions that we want to start. For example, we know when we bought the property at the Cannon Beach Elementary that there were potentially issues with the facility. We found that definitely the roof's not been maintained for years, and that we want to make sure that the asset doesn't start to deteriorate further than what it has. For us to do that, we have to spend money on replacing a roof. We have to do it quickly so the roof can be done by the next time it rains. And so there are some cases where we may be pre-funding, and we might be looking either to the ending fund balance or some other source where there would be essentially a loan. And so that we can go ahead and take care of some of those items. And then when we get financing for the project, we can incorporate repayment of that loan to the general fund or whoever it comes from in that process. There's also the fire district has approached the city to find an ongoing revenue source for fire district operations. They made a presentation. They make a very good argument. It is available on their website. And so there's discussion of ways that we could potentially assist them with an ongoing revenue source. And we are looking at that. And with that, we're saying, is there a way that could potentially benefit the city? So those are some things that have to do with the with loans, et cetera. Is there any questions on any of that? On the screen, any questions?
I have a question. Could you talk a little bit more about the discussions with the Rural Fire Protection District? A revenue source? Are we talking more taxes, or what are we talking about?
No, they're limited in what they can do to generate funds. And what they've come to the city and asked if the city would impose a food and beverage tax. They have several reasons for that. One is that like 70-something% of their calls are on tourists. 100% of their revenue comes from citizens. And so we're trying to find a way to go ahead and pass that cost on to the tourists. And that is not an option that they have. The city would have to do it. So with some of the things that we have going, we looked and said, well, possibly we could go ahead and combine what some of our needs are and we'll put that under one funding source.
Okay, but that's not in this budget.
I'm sorry?
That's not in this budget. That's just
Not yet.
something that's being discussed. Okay,
You're correct. There's a lot of things would have to happen. The decision has not been made. If and when it is, then there would probably be a need to modify the budget to incorporate that revenue source.
Okay.
Good question, fellas. Thanks.
thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Brandon.
Bruce, I've heard lately that the way the state is deciding to distribute those funds is to just give a set amount to each jurisdiction. I guess it would be Ms. Weber and, oh God, my memory's failing me. Our other representative, Senator Johnson.
Johnson?
Yes. And has any attempt been made to contact them?
We contacted Weber's office because isn't she a representative as opposed to a senator?
Yes, exactly.
Yes, okay. The process started in the House. And so we did contact, the council did a joint letter to her office. So
Yeah.
that contact has been made. I don't know what the status is at this point as far as the distribution. I think that they did, the first funds that came out, it was done on a pro rata basis based on population. And we will get over time approximately $360,000. But
Yeah.
those are not the funds from the American Rescue Plan.
No, I'd heard that figure would be about 4 million per district, which is leading me towards thinking it's not a lot of money for the entire district. And it seems like it'd be quite a bit of a long shot that we'd be getting any of it.
Right. And we're not counting on any of those funds. For example, some of the projects that they would go to infrastructure. The infrastructure that we are looking at is some of the transmission system with the wastewater system and the water supply, resiliency and water. And those are both funded or will be funded upon approval of this budget and the rate increase, which will come to the June regular meeting from the council. So any other funds that come in offset those costs. We're not relying on those funds at this time to do any of our projects.
Okay, thank you, Bruce.
Okay. Other questions? Thanks. On to the next section here. The council budget priorities, we put this in the budget every year, and that's because it's a guideline for staff to decide what goes in. And the guidelines include, is the priority identified in the strategic plan for funding in this fiscal year? Is the priority one, which is appropriate to the city's role as a governing agency? Third is, does the priority lead to a future that will best serve the community in terms of ensuring that Cannon Beach continues to be an attractive, healthy, safe, and livable place for all? And finally, does the priority take into consideration expressed citizen interests and needs? So that's what guides us. I believe it guides the council. Any questions on those? Okay. The 21-22 budget includes a $700,000 transfer to the general fund reserve. And we will have an ending fund balance of $2,013,820. At one point, we were trying to make sure we were able to put $400,000 in each year. We weren't able to do that last year. This year, to try to make some of that up, we're putting in $700,000 to try to build that reserve. And We actually, if you recall, the graphs that we showed last year is from a cash flow standpoint, we anticipated we would need to go into that reserve to stay whole. And as it happened, we never had to use the reserve funds. So, and plus we're putting $700,000 in this year. Before last year, the general fund would do transfers to the water fund and the water reserve fund and the wastewater fund, wastewater reserve fund. We were able to eliminate that last year and we eliminated it again this year. Reflects an amount of $400,799 in county TRT collections, which is based on the return of the promotion portion of the county TRT for operations of the jail. Currently, I don't know if we've taken any official action, but that is the current funding source for activities associated with the Cannon Beach Elementary. In order to move forward with some of our higher cost utility capital projects, we had to move away from the idea that we would be able to save enough money to be able to go ahead and accomplish them. And so what we've done is change to a philosophy of financing projects over the long term. There's a couple things that I like about that. One is that if you make the decision to do the project and you get the financing, you can do the project. And so it's taken care of and we can move forward. Another thing is that if we were to go ahead and say, pay for everything that we were going to do up in the reserve, I'm not in the reserve, the water resiliency for everything coming down from the springs, we would pay for that now. Everybody would get it for free after this. If we finance that for 30, 40 years, everybody will pay the portion for that, the years that they were here. Somebody else will continue to pay at some other time. So this relieves the burden of current people having to pay 100% of the cost of improvements. And frankly, I don't think that with the things that we need to take care of now, that it would be possible to tax anybody or raise rates to go ahead and say that we're going to get, $13 million to take care of water resiliency. So this will spread the cost to all people that come after us. In consultant professional fees, one of the things that we've noticed, and I know that council is working on, is that we have run out of readily buildable sites. And things were easy to solve if somebody just came in and bought a site that was easy to build on. What's happening is that things that we never thought would occur are occurring. People are trying to build where we never thought anybody would be able to build. That has resulted in challenges. The challenges are things that the city has to face. And so my first 2.5 years here, I'd heard of LUBA, Land Use Board of Appeals. I heard that there was one. And in the past 6 months, we visited them 6 times. So what happens is that significantly increases our legal fees, but we have an obligation to defend our decisions. So there's a significant amount that's been put there. Talking about assumptions, property tax can only go up as high as much as 3%, or whatever the rate it happens to be. I think it'll be more than 3% this year, so we limited it to 3%. We're continuing the current room tax rate, the TLT of 8%. Proposed budget anticipates that the transient room tax revenues will have a slight decrease. And I'll ask Lori to explain that, because I'm thinking, how could it be decreased? But she has a good answer for that.
That's because we're comparing it to the current year budget,
Right. And yeah,
or the current year actual.
right. So what happened is we had a very low number and we actually collected a lot, which means it should be higher. So in order to get a realistic number, we said, let's compare it to how much we think we're really going to get in this fiscal year, not what we had budgeted, because it's a meaningless number at this point. And so we're anticipating that when, again, we've had 3 record quarters, we think it'll be down about 3% from that number, not necessarily the original budget number. That make sense to everybody? It's still a good number. I'll ask Lori to take over from here. I probably went farther than I should have, if you would. You want to continue on the budget message items or want me to continue? I'll continue. You don't have it up. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay, proposed budget anticipates that the transient room tax revenues, I'm sorry, we just talked about that one. Following revenues are projected to increase by the amount shown in the upcoming year. Property taxes and state distributions, about 4.2%, which equals $50,448. Charges for services, $982,000 or 13.66%. And transient room tax collecting $1,388,000 or 38% of that would be a 38% increase. Are there any questions on anything I've gone over recently? Yes.
I have a question. Okay, so the bullet point before that said it's a decrease. We're going to do a decrease. And then in this one, it says that it should be up. I know I'm just not understanding it. But
No, those are good points. And I believe in this case, Lori, are we comparing to the actual budget for this year? 2021?
We're talking about the area where it says property taxes, charges for service and transient room tax.
see, the one above it, that
That's what we talked
We're
about.
saying these are the ones that increase.
and then for transient room tax, and then down here, it says that it's an increase of 38%.
Two dots,
Right.
yeah.
That's correct.
I don't get it.
What,
get it either.
I had the same question. It, one place it says there's a reduction and
Well,
further line down, it
Aren't
says
you-
there's an increase, but it's a different.
Aren't you
base.
comparing it to two different things though?
Yes,
Like
it's
where it
two different
says a
bases.
reduction, you're looking at the actual of what we're taking in. And this seems to be a record year, so you're assuming that what we're going to get next year is going to be less than the actual of what we're taking in. And then down here, you're looking at what the budget was, and we budgeted really low. And now we're saying that we're going to look at an increase from the budget of 38%. Is that right?
We will check that.
Comparing them to the budget that we have right
Yeah.
now.
Right, which is
Overlap.
really low.
Okay,
Because
okay.
we
I
did
get
a
that.
really low
Okay,
budget.
yeah, I get
Is that
that.
right?
Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
you're right, Phyllis. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
The,
Alicia was indicating she wanted to talk, but I think she's got.
Alicia wants to talk, I think. Alicia.
oh, okay, yeah. Alicia?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought maybe it was just a misunderstanding because in the bullets, it has a dash and then the 50,000 and a dash and the 982. And I thought maybe that was just being misinterpreted as a negative. So that was just, I was just wondering if that was what someone was seeing.
No, it was the comparing the two different things.
Yeah.
One was 2021 and the other one was what we're actually collecting in 2021. Okay. Salary and wages will be adjusted according to the employees' respective collective bargaining agreements. We have at the staff level, we've completed negotiations with both the police guild and the general employees SEIU union. We have TAs or tentative agreements on all of the proposals or existing items. And at this time, I think that the guild has ratified their contract. And we expect on May 14th, the election for SEIU will be complete. So we intend to bring both contracts to council at the June regular meeting.
I might make a note here. I know Nancy had a question about PERS at our preliminary budget meeting. And you were, I think, interested in knowing how much it increased from our prior year budget numbers. comparing budget to budget, it increased 17%
17%.
on that. So just wanted to let you know that.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Um, Expenses for community programs are smaller than the previous fiscal year because we added a new fund to account for the last 1% transient room rate increase. Is that the one from the county? We've not done one recently.
This is regarding our transient room tax fund that goes to the chamber. This is where we kind of got into this last night. This is where
Yeah.
we used to pay the money out of in the general fund.
Okay, that's
And
true.
then we transferred it over to the its own fund.
Yes.
Okay, so that's what
Yeah,
that is.
and what happened is a year or two ago, we changed the way that we work our arrangement with the chamber. Back then, they received a significant amount from the TLT and $150,000 from the general fund to run the visitor center. We combined it down to say, you will receive all of the 1%, the 70% of the 1%, but you pay all expenses out of that. That's significantly, the amount that they're receiving is lower than what it was prior, but they have a potential upside. If there's a big year in collections, they would have more funds. So that's how that happened. Right?
One other question, and I need to run up to the second bullet point at the top of the page.
Yep.
This budget is based on continuing the current room tax of 8%. That does not include the county section. Okay, that's what I needed to know. That's all.
Okay.
Include the state?
So.
Okay, so it's just the city's 8%.
Yeah.
Okay.
Essentially, yes, yes, it does. I would try to explain a little bit, but it would just make it worse. So, okay, we're getting into things that are maybe a little outside my wheelhouse, but approximately $7,486,473, or 23.3% of the budgeted resources will be utilized by citywide ending fund balance carryovers. Anybody have any questions on that? Okay, transient lodging taxes are estimated to account for approximately $5,025,515, or 15.6%. The revenue sources, charges for services account for $8,174,964, or 25.4%. And transfers in account for $5,939,024, or 18.5% of total resources. Good on that?
Question,
Who was the question?
Daryl.
Okay, Daryl, please, go ahead.
I just had a general question, I guess, charges for service. What does that mean?
That means things like business licenses are considered a charge for service. Basically licenses, permits, fees, things that we charge a customer for, and they're getting something in return, like a license,
Okay,
that type of thing. Short-term rental permits.
right. So these are charges that residents end up paying.
No, because it's like, if you're doing business in the city, you need a business license,
Gotcha.
that kind of thing. Right. So if you want to rent your house as a short-term rental, then you come and get a permit from us. Those are the types of qualifying revenues that fit under that category.
Great, thanks.
I've got a question. This adds up to about 82.8%. Where's the rest of the money coming from?
Look at page 8. Those are all the total, all funds, city.
Okay,
This is what we're comparing here. So you've got Taxes. Just
Okay, so in other words, I could have looked this
highlighting
up myself, sorry.
We're highlighting the top
Yeah.
dollar amounts from the
Okay.
revenue.
Okay, all right, thanks, sorry. Yeah, I could have looked that up myself, sorry.
Don't worry about it.
Bruce,
Yes.
the transfers in, do they include loans that are anticipated to come in?
No,
No.
transfers are just moving money from one fund to another. It's just purely monetary money going back and forth.
Okay, thank you.
So an example might have been when we used to put money into the water fund from the general fund. That would have
Yes,
been that would have been a transfer.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right. CY personnel services expenditures reflected in the proposed budget are increasing by approximately 8.33% when compared to fiscal year 2021. Any questions? Okay, we just talked about personnel services and the 8.33%. But those increases are attributable to increases in PERS, which is the state retirement system, COLA and step increases, which had just been negotiated, and the addition of one full-time equivalent position in the community development department. The purpose of that position is to provide assistance to the director in trying to handle day-to-day activities, which take up an inordinate amount of time. And there are just a lot of larger or higher level items that are slowing down as a result. Materials and services is an increase of 7.53% or $642,000. Capital outlay, a net increase in overall amounts from the prior fiscal year of 661% or $6,087,487. The reason for that is that we didn't do anything in this category last year. And so we still have vehicles, well, we have one or two vehicles that are parked out here on Gower all the time because they're not usable. But so there's going to be an increase in the request for the vehicles. We also we have, I've forgotten the exact number, but we have a lot of stairs associated with beach accesses. And those take quite a beating. And so we try to replace one every year. And so we have funding for $65,000 for one. Emergency management. There are a number of activities that are anticipated. Included in that $87,000 are grants that would be associated with funding those. So if we don't get the funding source, we don't do it. But what's happening is that Rick Hudson is doing an amazing job of improving the cache sites, the supplies that we have on hand. We're actually trying to get power to them in this year's budget. So those are some of the things we're making great strides in emergency management recently. Public art, we're trying to restore the public art program. Councilor Risley has been working, I've been working with them too, at the Oregon Environmental Council, OEC. And they have grants that they can do for public art. They contacted us, things all slowed down as a result of COVID, but they contacted us and said they were interested in doing well, do you want to talk about it, Robin? The beach bill?
It was our 50th year and we were wanting to do a commemoration of the beach bill. And we got pretty close to working it out and then COVID hit. And we've just recently contacted him to make sure that they might still be interested and they said yes.
Yeah, and they've done others, which was the land use bill.
They also have the bottle bill.
Yeah.
And they've done some things to commemorate that as well.
Yeah, and
around the state.
yeah, and they selected us for the beach bill because an awful lot of it happened as a result of things here. So, and I appreciate that Councilor Risley keeps me moving on those as best I can. So we're not making quite the progress we would like, but frankly, we will need to be able to get back to where we can have in-person meetings of the art committee, that sort of thing, because it'll be a competitive process. So it really wasn't possible, but this $25,000, I think, has been budgeted for 1 or 2 years to try to go ahead and stimulate that program. The class, let me see, the TRT fund, that's the funds, let me see, the county imposed a 1% TLT tax in order to pay for operations of the new jail. They were allowed under state law to keep 30% of that for general fund type expenses. 70% has to be spent on tourism facilities or tourism promotion. They didn't have a need for that, and so they were giving it back at this time to the cities where it was generated. So we've been using that to, again, to fund things having to do with the Cannon Beach Elementary. And we don't know exactly what the roof is going to cost, but it's going to be in the neighborhood for both buildings of $750,000. So that will eventually be paid for out of that account. But again, that was one of those that we may have to pre-fund from the general fund to get to that point, because we don't have $750,000 in that account yet.
Bruce,
Yeah.
have we started collecting the money from the county
Yes.
on that?
Yes.
So we have,
We have collected some. It was used to buy the building, the $400,000.
okay,
Well, $302,000 came from that account. And then there was a loan from the TAC fund of about $100,000 or so. This budget makes the second payment.
Yes.
This makes the second payment. It's $34,000 a year to pay back the TAC fund. So that's another case where we've borrowed money from somebody and then paid it back when the other funds came in.
okay.
So between, paying those, paying for engineering studies on the site, those sorts of things, we don't have the full amount. We've been spending the money, on the project as we go.
So we already have one debt service attributed to the school requirement, one debt service requirement.
You can call, I guess I look at debt service as something that we do when we get a loan from somebody, but the internal loan, yes, we have borrowed money.
A loan's a loan.
Yes. To me, it's an internal loan, but that, you're correct. And the second payment will be made this year.
Okay,
It's a 3-year commitment. Okay. Building official funds, $36,000 for a vehicle. That vehicle is the Explorer you see parked out here on Gower that never moves. That's the vehicle that we're replacing. The RV park, the city owns the park. We have a contract with Escape Lodging to operate it. So we have to take care of the capital expenditures. And they've asked for a cart. We're loaning them a vehicle now, but they've asked for a cart because when somebody comes in and they try to go ahead and show them where their slot is or something, they just want to be able to jump in a cart and be able to go ahead and lead somebody in. Right now, they're using a pickup truck, and sometimes it's available, sometimes it's not. So it's just for smaller things, servicing restrooms, that sort of thing. So that cart would be $10,000. The RVs are very tough on pavement and sometimes don't stay on the pavement and break the corners. So we're anticipating a project to repave the roads in there, and that'll be approximately $365,000. Any questions there so far? Utility funds. The dump truck, $63,000. That'll be split across several division funds. Problem with the dump truck, I think I talked about this last year, is if it's rated at 10,000 pounds, the chassis, the bed on it or the bucket is 10,000 pounds. So as soon as we throw in a bale of hay, we're overloaded. So we need to get that out of the system and to get something where we can actually carry a sufficient load. Total vehicles and equipment of 119,000. Beach access of 65,000. We talked about emergency. We talked about public art. I think I just covered all of this. I'm sorry. Down to utility funds. A pontoon boat. I was interested when I saw a pontoon boat for the maintenance work of the wastewater ponds, but I think there's a picture in the budget. They actually have to go out into the ponds and do work, and what they use now is not very safe. And so this is a small pontoon boat, but it's something from where it's a platform that people can work from. So I feel strongly that we need to get that. One-way intersection improvements. This was a, sure would like to try to take care of Warren Way and Hemlock. Karen and her staff pursued a grant. We received a $100,000 grant to install a four-way stop at that location. The council added another $38,000 to cover the entire budget. Karen also negotiated an agreement with, what is the inn? Toldana Inn, to where the candlesticks, as they call them, are out into the asphalt, that we would install landscaping in that area to improve that whole, the look of that whole site. And that they would do maintenance forever on that. So we're collaborating with a private sector partner to beautify the site, as well as installing all the things that will be associated with the four-way stop, including handicap walkways, everything tied to that. That's that project. Fleet truck of 35,000 used by divisions. And the reserve funds is $26,000, $994. The reserve funds can be used only with permission from the council, but those are funds that are not currently allocated. Water resiliency project, which is was talking about earlier, which is the water supply, is $1,777,667. Pump station projects of $1,290,000. Questions? Okay, general reserve, we talked about a $700,000 contribution this year to bring the funds up to $2,013,820. Those funds can only be accessed with council approval. So once they go into that reserve, there has to be special action taken if they are going to be used. I believe we anticipated using them last year. I don't think we've touched them since I've been here.
No, we have not.
Yeah, so we're just allowing that to build. Debt service is an increase of $44,467. And that's to pay for the bonds that we currently have for the wastewater ponds, Nicola Creek Forest Reserve. They were restructured as part of the bond payments, and they've increased by $6,250 in this budget. Water and wastewater utilities, a budgeted annual debt service of $55,907. And those are for the projects that I talked about earlier, including water supply resiliency, lift stations, that sort of thing. Transfers be increased by $3,014,821. And the general fund transfers increased this year by $1,641,304. These transfers are being largely driven from the water and sewer reserve to the water fund and the wastewater reserves. So essentially, they're staying within water, staying within wastewater, but they're moving to a place that they can actually be applied to pay expenses. Just to give you a comparison, without the movement of the $2,897,000, the increase would only be up $117,000. So it's because we have a lot of activity that when we're moving those funds, it seems like a lot, and it is, but that's because of what we're trying to accomplish for this system. And again, $700,000 for the general fund reserve. Last year, we had to reduce expectations and contingencies. And so, but this year we've been able to go ahead and adjust them upward. So the contingencies total $602,000. And any expenditure from these contingencies are within departments. But in order to use the contingencies at all, we have to go to council for their approval to move that money. We talked about emergency management a little bit earlier. Community development, we talked about the planner position. We also, the council made a decision to increase short-term rental permits from $75 to $500 per year. This will raise the revenues from that program from 16,000 to approximately 94,000, increase about $78,000. The Community Development Department did a survey of other communities that have short-term rentals, and we were at the bottom of the list in terms of charges. We do have a lot of expenses that are associated with that program. There are audits that are done by the finance department, there's enforcement, there's a lot of other things, and we weren't recovering our costs. So this will get us closer to the point that we're recovering the cost. Records management, we are trying to get rid of paper and also trying to make our records more accessible to everyone. And so we started a program with the state Department of Records. What they do, it's a contractor, they digitize our records. Then they go through the records, and do whatever, ready to be destroyed, whatever, they go ahead and they do that. And then in the meantime, everything is digitized and it becomes available to us, and we can make it available online to anybody doing research. We're getting to some of the more expensive parts where we're going to be digitizing plans. Police station project, we talked about a little bit. Council talked about it last night.
Stand up.
I'm sorry. Carol? Well, would you unmute? Or are we muted?
You can unmute.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Question on records management are all those records that are being digitized simply old records or even new records, 2020, 2021? So is this going to be like an ongoing expense every year?
yes, there will be an ongoing expense, but right now we're trying to catch up. We've
Okay.
got records stored in the attic that we're trying to digitize.
Right. Now current records, like these types of meetings, I noticed they're being digitized. So is that just being done in-house?
No, we have a contractor that's doing,
The newer stuff we are doing ourselves. Yeah.
I'm sorry, the newer stuff that we're generating now, for example, this budget is being done in-house.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, and another benefit is that the state will take over the requirements for whatever the records, when they can be destroyed, that sort of thing. So they separate those out before they're sent out. Okay? Good question. Fund. In the past, we recently did something with the stormwater fund where we are collecting more on the tax bill to reduce the requirement for a transfer from the general fund. But this year, we have not done that with the road fund, and the transfer. So the increase is 546,000, right? Yeah, what will it totally be? You'll get to that later.
Yeah.
But we have to increase $546,000 from the general fund this year.
Bruce,
Yes,
could we go back to the police and city hall for
sure.
a second?
Yes,
You say in here, neither a final budget nor location has been identified. We know that, but and so, nothing's been set aside. I'm just wondering if, since we know this project is coming and it's going to be an expensive project, if we wouldn't want to put something in a reserve and start building it. You talked about that a little bit, from if you do the food and beverage. But, I just wonder, since it's something that is, it really has to be done.
Mhm.
It has to be done. I've been listening to this conversation about replacing this building for almost 30 years.
Mhm.
And we've had it on stilts, we've had it at Southwind, we've spent a lot of time and a lot of money working on this. And then somebody, it doesn't get agreed on. So then it gets pushed to the back burner and then we start new projects. And I just think that, the community bulletin that you put out, and it really let us know what the condition of this building is, and especially what the police department is. I mean, I knew it was small and I knew it was, but I had no idea it was in the terrible condition it's in,
It is.
and I just feel like, that it's a very, very important project. And I just wonder if we can't somehow find some money to start a reserve for this. I've been listening to meetings and stuff that you guys have been talking, and I know Robin doesn't want to do it until there's a place for it. And, that's going to be the tough part. That's going to be the tough part. But, and I get that part, but we know it has to be done. And I just, it just seems to me that when we've got so much money and we're spending so much money, we're not spending any money on that very important project. And that's just what I'm,
It's a very good point. And the reason it's not in the budget is that whether it moves forward or not, there has to be a funding source. So we're mentioning that it's out there. Right now, council is looking very closely at potential funding sources for the project and the site. And last night, the conversation we said, we talked about is there's a lot to be done. There's two things that have to be decided to move forward with this project. One is the site, and the other was how you pay for it. So do you pay for it by food and beverage? Do you pay for it by property taxes?
I understand all of that.
Again, but it's not, when that happens, that's when this will go in, because without a funding source in a budget, all we can do is say is, hey, look forward to this.
Well,
So,
but we put money away in reserves for future projects. We put money away in reserve for utility, for water, wastewater. We put, because we know we're going to need that. We don't need it now, but we know we're going to need it.
Yeah.
We know we're going to need this money. And it just seems to me that while we've got money, that we should start. And then also, and we did this at the fire district, that, when we knew we were going to need a new Arch Cape station, we put money away. And then when we finally could do it, we didn't even need to go. Granted, it was a very small project, but our intention was that if we had to go to the voters, we would have started saving for it. And we could say, we've got this money, but we need your help, that sort of thing. So when you go to the voters and you need to ask them for money, sometimes, if you've already started helping yourself, it's a lot easier to get help from others. And that's just my, feeling. And then that way you've got money because then once the site is found, you can start with a design. You can pay for a design. You can, you've got some of that, not building money, but the pre-building expenses that you would already have the money for, instead of, worried about when we can do that.
So you're suggesting taking money from the general fund or the general fund reserve to start?
Yes.
A reserve
Just,
fund.
it doesn't have to be $1 million, but just, get that started. And, because it's something we need to do. And I think that if we get money set aside, started, that reserve, that money's starting, that pile that we're going to need, it's going to happen. But see, it just keeps getting put off. It just keeps getting put off because there'll never be an agreement on a site. There'll never be an agreement on a site. And, and we're hoping, I know you're talking about the food and beverage tax, and that will go for it. But in the meantime, that's not decided either, but we're deciding our money now, not future money, but not here. That's just my take on the whole thing, and that's,
There are some contingents. We do have some general fund reserves and contingency
we have
reserve.
nothing designated. And once it's designated, it moves.
It can be moved by council decision.
Yeah, the last 30 years, that could have happened.
Well, the thing is, nobody could ever agree to.
Exactly.
With the money sitting there, it says.
But see,
Or not.
Yeah.
Real decision is to get council and citizens to agree, yes, we're gonna go ahead. We have reserves. They haven't been earmarked at this point. And having them earmarked can mean that
having it earmarked,
they can't be used for anything else.
well,
So,
and that's good. That's what I like. It can't be used for anything else. It needs to be used for a new city hall and a new police station.
And Sharon, it's interesting that what we call the general fund reserve now, was it reserved? I think it was $200,000 or something was being put in every year for
Yes.
future city hall and police.
I was on the budget committee then.
Okay, right. And what happened,
And that.
there was a recommendation that we change that because we had zero funds in a general fund reserve. So we turned that into the general fund reserve. And so now, and I hear totally what you're saying, but when I look at, okay, where would those funds come from? We will have a $2 million general fund reserve. And out of that will be $700,000 we are taking from funds from this year. And so those are the two places, I think, robbing something else, so we could potentially put some money over. So we might be able to put $200,000 in for City Hall and $500,000 transfer. Or we could do something more bold by saying we're going to take $1 million out and put that in the city. But I'm just saying those
No, yeah,
are the funding sources.
right. But,
So-
I just think that it needs to be earmarked. We've got so many projects going
Yeah.
that general fund reserve is going to, somebody will, there'll be a loan out of there to something, or there'll be, it'll be used for something else. And this building will not get,
Way to accomplish.
we've talked enough about that. We should move on.
Well, I'll tell you,
That was just my.
there's a way to accomplish that if everybody agrees on that. And that's that when we look at the funds that would need to be transferred potentially for schematic design and design development. Those were going to come from a loan from the reserve. When we were going to pay for if we decide we're going to move forward, we're not going to have funds from a loan for a long time. My opinion, we need to start design immediately, so we're going to transfer from the general fund reserve to start paying for those costs.
Or use contingency from the general.
Or
fund.
contingency from the general fund, either one. But we can, funds that we are pretty sure that we're going to do that with, we can move into that account that you're talking about. If we're going to move $200,000 or $300,000 eventually from contingency, potentially we can move it. If we're going to move $200,000 or $300,000 from the general fund account, we could move that over into a special account, as you said, because we're kind of, wink, wink, earmarking it anyway, saying that would probably be our funding source. So it is possible to do what you're talking about within the funds that are currently available in this budget. So it is possible to do without damaging it.
Discuss that later.
Okay, yeah.
In the, divvying out.
Anything we can do to move it forward, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay.
And then the additional funding considerations, I'm grateful that the council has given us latitude to try to take care of things that need to be done, like the city hall, adding an amenity like Cannon Beach Elementary, and taking care of our water supply, those sorts of things. Those are things that are important. The city is looking forward. My thought is if you're keeping up with the status quo, you're falling behind. So I think that we're in a good position on being proactive right now. Are there any questions on the budget message? Okay. Listen, good question. Do you want to go on with general fund?
Okay. I'm going to take page 27. Prior to page 27 is just some summarized versions of the general fund, broken out into certain revenue categories and expenditure categories. And it's broken down on 26 in a different way by expenditure type, capital outlay, personnel. So I'm going to start on 27 and I'm going to bring you back to page 14 and 15. Well, let's start at 14. Our general fund, I've given you the top 10 budgeted revenue streams. You can see number one, always number one, tax. So that's 72% of our top 10 revenues. So property tax is always up there. And these are pretty much the players. They're always in this top 10, but they move up and down occasionally. Like our interest income used to be much higher and it's moved down ranks. So this just gives you kind of a idea. I'm going to hit these and then maybe just kind of skim over some of the other revenues. If you have a question about a specific line on page 27, let me know. And then on 15, we'll come back to this in a moment when I talk about room taxes. Page 27, and this is just strictly the general fund. So our beginning fund balance is estimated at 2.47 million. It's a very good beginning fund balance, and the reasons for that, I think I told you at the preliminary budget meeting, I talked about that. We budgeted for COVID in our current year. We didn't know what to expect. Things were better than we thought they would be, thank goodness. And so revenues came in a lot stronger than we thought. Of course, our spending authority was reduced drastically so that we could operate and continue to operate, but not do a lot of extra stuff. So that's how we get to that point there at the beginning fund balance. So that gives us some pretty good leverage going into next year to make up for some of the things we couldn't do. Property taxes, I estimate this by adding 3% to the assessed values of the current year. And just adding our permanent rate onto that. And so that goes up about 3% each year. Obviously, if we have new buildings that come on board, that will increase that as well, but I don't factor that into my estimate. Prior taxes, that's just, I look at the history and kind of gauge what I think that will be. And then transient room taxes, there's 6 lines here that comprise the total room tax that we're estimating in the general fund. And so then if you go back to page 15, you can see that those 6 lines equal in the chart here, and I'm looking at the header 2022. And these are all budgeted amounts. These are not actual dollars. So in 2021, we budgeted 2.7 million in the general fund. We're now budgeting 3.7 million in this next fiscal year. So that's the total of those 6 lines. If you look back to page 12, Bruce and I discussed, where do we go with our room tax estimate? It's kind of an important estimate because it is one revenue stream. So we came up with this plan to select 2019 actual amounts, and that would be our budget for 2022. I think it's still very conservative, but not so much that it hurts our ability to have spending authority to do what we need to do and, try to come out of this COVID that we've been in. So that's how we came up with that amount. And then if you go back to page 15, to the chart again, under 2022, you'll see the green bar down here, total transient room tax. And you'll see that same number, 4.5 million, because the general fund is a beneficiary of the room tax, as well as our tourism and arts fund and our transient room tax fund. So we divvy up the whole pool of money into those three funds that we collect. The TAF and the transient room tax each get 1% of our 8%. So the general fund is getting the 6%. So you can see that's how we determined what we're doing. And then the county TRT, I just budget the same 1% that we expect to get from them. So overall, the room tax revenues citywide are, as stated in the budget, are 4.9 million. So that's the total estimate for 2022. Moving back to page 27, franchise fees, $201,500. That is the receipts we get for utilities like telecom, Northwest Natural Gas, Charter Cable, use of our right-of-ways. We charge them a percentage of their revenue that are attributed to the use of the right-of-way. So for instance, we have telecom, that amount has been decreasing over the years. People aren't using landlines as much as they did. I mean, back in 2011, we were receiving 13,000 roughly. 2019, we received 5,000. So that's a diminishing revenue, but I'm budgeting 5,000, or I'm budgeting 4,000 this year. Northwest Natural and Pacific Core are two of our other franchisees, and those can kind of fluctuate with the weather. I think, if it's a cold winter, you're going to see those numbers go up a little bit. So I just kind of look at the history. Northwest Natural in 2011 was 40,000, and it kind of goes up and down between 36 and 40. So anyway, I'm budgeting 34,500 for that this year, or for next year. Pacific Core, the same thing. In 2011, it was 81,000. 2019, now it's up to 96,000. So I'm going to budget 96,000 for that. Charter Cable has been doing rather well. 2011, we were receiving 39,000. And in 2019, we were receiving 64,000 actual dollars. And I was talking to Rusty today about trying to figure out, why those increases are occurring, because Rusty said, there's fiber optic line, there's cable line in our infrastructure, and, Spectrum is Charter Cable. They are, I get my internet service from them, and they have constant increases, it seems. And I think a lot of people are really using their service. And so I think that's pretty much why that's increasing. They've got the live streaming now. I think they're really doing a good business. And so it's encouraging that is an increasing franchise fee. So our total is 201,500. And so that's a little bit of the history on that. The next items are our state revenues that we get, and that's the dollar amount that we had our public hearing on. The state sends us this money. And I think I told you the dollar amount, so I probably won't go into that too much more unless you have a question. Land leases are another top 10, $45,575. And our interest income is reversing itself. If you look over to the left margin, under our 2018-19 actual dollars received, we were receiving $140,000. And so that has been decreasing just because of interest rates falling recently. The next item after interest income is American Rescue Plan, and this is not in the top 10 because this is not a recurring revenue stream that we can rely on. This is the American Rescue Plan Act. We are going to be allotted $360,000. We're supposed to get our first amount. They're breaking it into 2 disbursements. And so we should be getting that within the next month, and that will go into our current year budget. And the next installment will be June or May. It'll be the spring 2022 when we'll get this 180,000. So we're gonna have to wait a little while for that last installment. Municipal court is in our top 10. That's been doing pretty well. Thank you, Jason. And of course, you can see these lines here where it says fees, 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 short-term rental permit, planning. Yeah, skipped a bunch of stuff here in the middle. Sorry, do you see where I'm at? These are community development fees, and you can see the short-term rental permit. Bruce talked about this in his message. That's going up significantly. And so
I have a question for you on that. You have it down here for 94.5, but on page 15, you only have 50,772.
Which page?
page what?
The income here is 94.5, and that's the proposed amount. But on page 15, you have for 2022 only 50,772.
Oh, that's the tax that's derived from short-term rentals. Yeah. Yeah. And then so if you add those up, that's $116,500, which is the same number as on page 14 that I showed you in the top 10. And then finally, parking lot maintenance, that's $38,061. And so that is kind of how we came up with our estimates for the top 10. We do have some grants in here, as Bruce mentioned. Well, the TSP and then emergency management grants, helping our bottom line there as well. So that kind of hits the highlights, I think. Spins it all. Oh, the transfer in from the RV park, that's significant as well. When we talk about the RV park, you'll see that it's in a very healthy condition. And we were able to transfer a bit of money over to the RV reserve to fund the future paving that's going to be needed. You know, we've talked about that in budget committee before. And also a 20% contingency, it's running around 400,000. So there was still excess funds left over. So we thought we would utilize that in the general fund to help pursue some of our goals. Hi, Alicia.
Oh, I had a question. Sorry. Go ahead, Alicia, you go first.
Okay, I was just curious what the nacho grant is.
I think that's Nacho.
That's the NATO grant. That's actually through the.
Nachos for everyone.
Nacho, but.
Is that Cinco de Mayo? Yes, it is.
Oh, there you go.
Rick keeps
So-
correcting us that it's nacho, but we just always say nacho, just.
I was corrected very forcibly when I called it the nacho grant as well. So it's now
It's
named,
just more fun.
yes, it is more fun.
Did, Alicia, did somehow we answer your question in there someplace? Okay, good.
I had a question. American, you've got the 180,000 for the American Rescue Plan. And then at the very end, we've got another American Rescue Plan grant for 87,000. Is that from two different buckets of money?
Yeah, this would be a grant that Rick would try to secure through the other funds that are going to the state that they're going to try to filter down for infrastructure projects.
Okay. Thank you.
Everybody wants to say it. Any more questions on the nacho plan?
I do have another question, though. I'm just curious if we already have projects identified for any kind of infrastructure for this additional federal money? Separate from everything that we've already talked about, is there any other list going on? I know sometimes you try to keep, I've heard you speak in the past about having some shovel-ready projects ready to go. Is there anything else lingering out there that we might be ready to move on if additional money comes down?
Yes, Karen, would you address some of those?
Water line replacements within our neighborhoods.
Yeah, water line replacements within the neighborhoods. Also, we are working on the larger projects. For example, City Hall is one that we would be able to try to apply for. The water supply resiliency, the lift stations. So there are a number of projects that several of them are actually designed and could be ready to go, but we're trying to get them, we're trying to jump ahead on things as much as we can.
Permanent generators for your 4 lift stations that don't have permanent generators.
Yeah, and actually that's a grant that you're working on another source. That was Karen in the back said that we've applied for 4 emergency generators for lift stations, and those total $100,000.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, hey, any other questions for Lori? Okay. Looks like Jason's the next presenter.
I have a couple more.
Oh,
Under number 5,
sorry.
the non-departmental.
Sorry, it's okay.
You can skip around if you want.
Nice try.
No.
Okay, page 42. This is the non-departmental section of the general fund. And that first there for materials and services, those are costs we incur for staffing at the administrative level or the kind of the overhead level. We've got, you'll see the administrative services funds where we accumulate costs for staff and operations of finance, IT, executive, and public works admin and central services. And so we combine all of those costs and charge the general fund, and we charge all the other programmatic funds, operation funds. We charge them a certain percentage so that we recover those costs. So that's what that number is. That's the general fund share. And then we have total transfers out, and I know Bruce covered a lot of this. The transfer to the debt service, this is one we do every year until the GO bond is paid off for the wastewater lagoons. That's a portion of the total debt service. The other portion is levied by a tax on property. And so, and then you can see the next transfer from the general fund is the roads fund, and it's $746,000 this year. Last year it was $199,000. And here you'll see the transfer to the general reserve, $700,000. And a small amount to recycling fund, $29,162. And the last transfer listed there is to the Clatsop County TRT Fund, $388,600. And that is to fund cash flow for the roof. We want to pay that back to the general fund after we collect additional. We talked about that, Bruce, paying it back. The timing of the cash collections from the county, we get money twice a year. So it's not quarterly, so our cash flow is a little bit, problematic in that. And we can't wait to do the roof, really, so we need cash flow and then we'll pay it back in the following year. So, and it's been a pretty good year for room tax, so we should see some good money from the county. Huh?
Sure, a question I'm just curious about, when we do, like, we're borrowing this out of general and we'll pay it back, but, when you call them loans, do you pay interest to yourself or to the account you're taking it out of?
You can, if you have, like we did the loan agreement with the county TRT and the TAF fund. Can charge interest, but you do not have to. And because I presented a 0% loan.
The account you're taking it out of is losing if you don't. 1%, a lot, no, but
Yeah, it's a policy
it's
decision.
just a, okay.
And I presented it with a 0% interest. And I think I said, you can charge interest if you want, but that's how it ended.
I was just curious if you did or it doesn't matter.
I have in the past,
We were just talking about the roof, and I want to just clarify a couple of items because it's a current project, but when we're talking about the roof, we're not talking about just putting down an asphalt membrane.
No.
In those areas. So we're still waiting for information from our architects, but we've asked them to give us a rendering, or at least an elevation that shows what it would look like with cedar shakes. So like right now, it's asphalt shingles, and it really doesn't look inviting when you come into the town. So we're trying to do something different. Well, there's an upcharge on the shakes. Also, both buildings need to be seismically retrofit. And so if we're going to, it doesn't make sense for us to do the roof and say we're going to do this project later and then come back and then take the roof off and seismically retrofit. So anything associated with seismic retrofit with the roofs is being included in this project. So when we have to come back and do the walls, maybe foundation, we're already done with the roof, we just attach to it. So those are some things that significantly increase the cost of what you would normally think of for a roof that many square feet. But those are why we're looking at those options. And in addition, right now, anybody that we talk to, and our architects and engineers said, we don't know what it's going to cost. I mean, plywood used to be $20 a sheet, now it's 65. And so, and you've got 14,000 square feet of it in one location. So they're working on trying to go ahead and narrow down what that cost will be. I tend to over budget rather than say it'd be 400,000 and then kept it at 650. We got to scramble to find money. So that number is in there to try to go ahead and make sure that we're safe and can accomplish what we want to accomplish. Let me try to get that established.
She's got her hand up.
Okay.
How many years left on the geo bond debt for the lagoons?
Let me check.
Or you can just tell me later.
I have it right here. Okay, the lagoon. Which one was the lagoon? Well, we have two geo bonds. I can't remember which one is which, but the most recent payoff is 6/1/2025. And then the other one will be paid off 2027.
So they're coming up.
Yeah, it'll be nice. Get those paid off. Okay, so then on the rest of the non-departmental, what's left is the contingency. And that 14% is wrong there, and I've since corrected that. The contingency is actually 17.5%. And I think it's wrong somewhere else in here too that I've already corrected. for our future printing. So it's $913,897, which is a pretty good contingency. I could go on to the general reserve fund now. I think we've really talked about that enough. I think everyone probably knows we have $2 million in there. So, okay, that concludes, I think, my little section.
Jason is next. We want to take a break, a 5-minute break. It's been an hour and a half, and then we'll get started with presentation. Thank you. It's up to you guys. I just want. Okay, 5 minutes.
Madam Chair, just to clarify, it's the 2025 payoff year for the lagoons
20
on the GO bond.
Thank you.
I don't know if Alicia heard that or not, but
She comes back on, we can make sure.
We'll have it.
What you heard. Thanks, Lisa.
Okay. That's.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh. Don't run, you're fine. Jason, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council, and Budget Committee. I appreciate you guys giving your time to this useful cause of. Before I get started, usually previous chairs would coordinate with me an interpretive dance. So Sharon, if you want to.
Next meeting, I'll have to practice it. This was thrown on me.
Yeah, it was kind of caught by surprise, right?
No preparation time.
Richard always did an outstanding job.
Yeah.
So with the budget here, I'll just go over the things that are going up. There are a couple different things, and starting with personnel services, we have a contract negotiations this year. And so that's why you see an increase in the wages, and that kind of reflects on all the different things, including the PERS and insurance as well. Going down onto materials and services, we raised the telephone $1,000 because we're going to be switching over to each of the officers having a city issue. Just makes more sense, and it's a lot easier, especially when they're taking pictures and doing things with their personal phones. Those can be subpoenaed at any time, and so they don't necessarily want that to happen. But also, that will probably save us money on hotspots. We have Wi-Fi hotspots in each of the cars, but they can now use the city issued cell phones for that. So the next thing is the gas prices. That's just because I've seen an increase the last several months in the gas prices, and I don't know what next year is going to bring. So I'm just forecasting. So we're prepared for that. And just what I'm seeing on the news, there's lots of different issues with the tanker trucks and finding drivers for them. So it's increasing the prices. Dispatch services, there's a rather large increase. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. I think over the next several years, we're going to start paying more money into our dispatch services just because we're changing, hopefully for the better, to a microwave link, which will be simulcast. So it's a better radio system. And it was interesting because they just changed it about a month ago. And the day they changed it, our radios were the best anybody had ever heard in the county. And then they did one switch, and now they've been horrible ever since, worse than they were before. So it's a trial and error. We're certainly working on it. And those things do cost money. Talking with other agencies and other areas, we pay a very little amount of money for our dispatch services. So hopefully we'll get some improvement there. The increase in uniforms is about $3,500. That's just actually a common replacement that we need to do for bulletproof vests. They run about $1,500 each, and we have 2 to replace this year. Plus, when we do hire on our new officer, we need to get them a new one as well. And then, training education went up. This is something that I've wanted to do since I started, and it's actually adding Rosetta Stone and tutoring for each of the officers, which equates to about $6,000 a year for all of our officers to do that. That way they can learn Spanish and get tutored on it so that we have multi-language speaking officers. And so hopefully we'll get a full commitment from the officers, but even getting 2 or 3.
That's a voluntary
Yes.
thing for them.
Correct. Yep. And although part of that too in the contract is that if they do speak Spanish, they can get a pay incentive
Oh, good.
as well. So there is an incentive for them to do it on top of the fact just being able to understand and speak language. So then the only addition is a police vehicle. We didn't get one last year with the tight budget. This year we have one vehicle that we took out of service, and we're going to save the equipment for the new car, but we can't run it anymore. It's fried on the inside, and we actually replaced the whole engine a couple of years ago, but now all the electronics are gone on it. It's just too much to get it running. So we have that one, and then another one that's going to need replacing next year, but we're good with replacing one for now. Anything or any questions on the police side of the public safety budget?
Jason, how many vehicles do we have now?
I think we have a total of 7, and one is a take-home car for the lieutenant who's also our detective in response to major crime. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, moving to the lifeguard program. Same increases there with the personnel services because the lieutenant and myself fit under some of those as well, because we put some hours into working with the lifeguards in that program. The only increase would be under operating materials and supplies, which would be another $1,000, and that's just for replacing a surfboard this year. I met with the lifeguards the other day, and they have that to replace as well as getting some new wetsuits. That is all I have. Any questions on the lifeguard program?
Go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Question that relates to something else we're talking about. Is when you look at your responses to calls and stuff, can you give an estimate that similar to what the fire department is doing compared to residents and visitor?
Yes, that's something that we started this year as well, just to figure out, what the percentage is. And so they're doing that on each of their calls that they respond to, as well as traffic stops, denoting whether or not they were from Cannon Beach or even outside Cannon Beach and Plastic County, and then also if they were from out here. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Thank you.
Those are the ones that are getting tickets. That's how you.
Way to go, Jason.
Thank you, Jason. Or Chief, I guess. Oh. We have Jeff.
PowerPoint? I would like to. Never goes to a meeting without a PowerPoint, so hard time.
Mayor, council, budget committee, I'd like to make a formal request not to have to follow Jason next year. Can I go ahead?
Granted.
Community development, as Bruce spoke earlier, we put in for a new position with mostly day-to-day activities, projects that we wanted to do and need to do. And for that, and the personnel services is our big changes really just involve our consultant and professional fees. And it's the wag that tells the dog with and legal fees is really what that is all about. And so we are also hoping to do the code audit, and that's $60,000 right there. So I think when you look at kind of the increase in the legal fees and then the consultant professional fees bump, that kind of is where that those two intersect and bring the number up to that. You'll also see that TSP ODOT, that's the transportation grant, and that's where the other big request comes from. Building funds, as far as building, it will be kind of a new terrain out there because Alton, I think, is asking to go down to part-time. He's still doing service with City of Astoria right now, but at the end of the month, we'll be transitioning out of that. And with that, he's asking to go to part-time. We believe he's really only doing about 20 hours for us now, and expect that to probably stay about the same. So we're just going to work with him on that throughout the year, and hopefully that'll, we'll be able to resolve that as the year develops. I don't know how long he's continuing to stay in that position, but we hope to keep him as long as we can. The Affordable Housing Fund, that's the, we do want a new car. We need the vehicle for the building. But I was going to say, when Bruce was giving the city hall tours, that they really should have driven him around in that Ford Escape. Actually, it's got this kind of mildew. Lori wanted, she gets it, goes up her spine just to think about it. It's got mildew in it, and so. Anyhow, we need a replacement vehicle. We've supposedly in the budget a couple of years ago, we didn't get it. So we're hoping to get that Affordable Housing Fund. That's going to be changed. We're working with the Finance Department right now because we were previously taking the 1% on everything, and state statutes do not allow that. It's only for additional square footage, and so we're looking at those numbers now, and we'll be refunding some on that. So those numbers will change, and we'll see what the eventual funds on that will be. Does anybody have any questions?
I do, Jeff.
Yeah, go ahead, Brandon.
Could you elaborate, please, Jeff, a little bit more about the amount that we would have to refund and why we have to do that?
Yeah, state statute state that you only take the 1% or the state language says you only take the funds on additional new living square footage, okay? What we've been doing is we've been taking 1% on all of our building permits. That's not the way the state statute. And so when they instituted this, it was overlooked. And so Katie, one of the first things that she noticed when we were going to some of our e-permitting, updating our permitting system, she was looking at that language and came across that language. And so we caught it and have been working with finance, and Lori and Marnie are working on those numbers now with Katie. So I can't tell you exactly right now how much percentage wise and everything. And so that's why we're kind of in a flux right now looking at that.
Okay, just so that I'm clear on it, say you had a 1,000 square foot house and you put a 500 square foot addition. Are you saying you've been taxing a 1,500 square foot project?
No. What we've been taxing is if people came in and did a remodel or whatever and weren't adding any additional square footage, we were still collecting on that.
I see.
Okay, so not But what we would be collecting on doing, in your example, would just be that 500. That's what we should be. Okay.
But
So
are you also saying that, say, a house is remodeled, but no square footage is added, a refund is still due?
well, we will refund those that we have been collecting on those, right? Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Answers my question.
Any other questions?
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hey, Kelly.
Have you met Kelly? Hope you all have Joe. That's our Director of HVAC. I'm glad that she's here.
Nice to meet you, Kelly.
Yeah, you too. I'm happy to be here. Been here now for a couple months over a year, and I think this is my first public meeting where I won't have to say tufted puffin 20 times. We'll just leave it at that one.
Kelly moved here from elsewhere, and her first day on the job, we said, we're shutting down everything.
Correlation is not causation.
Yeah.
All right, so Haystack Rock Awareness Program, we are on page 31. I'm just gonna let you know, I'm not really a line by line person. It makes my eyes gloss over, so I'm gonna be speaking a little more broadly. But generally, our budget isn't too different this year. There's one capital outlay, otherwise personnel and materials are pretty comparable, but I'll talk about a few of the changes that we have and really kind of broadly what those changes are coming from. So yeah, after being here about a year, I feel pretty confident on my understanding now of what our departmental needs are and historical context for the very chaotic past spending that has happened and kind of the direction that I want to take this program and with that, what the budget needs are going to be for it. So I kind of have a few main priorities on this budget, and that's organizing, streamlining, and focusing our operations a bit more. It's also to improve the improving and measuring our high yield efficacy of our program and accomplishing our mission statement. And then third, addressing known deficiencies that has been apparent that EDREP has. So I kind of think that having all these is what every successful, sustainable, and efficiently run program should exhibit. So first, the biggest changes that I have on here are really relating to the organizing, streamlining, and focusing our operations. Most of that has to do with just kind of recategorizing and eliminating a few excess line items that we had for operations that didn't really directly contribute to HREP's mission. So this is what accounts for most of the small changes you see. So there's going to be like, for instance, office supplies goes up by 300. We reduce the copier expense by 100, reduce the telephone expense by 500. And this is just to more accurately reflect where the use was actually going. And that's most of what the changes are in the kind of top half of our materials and services expenses are. So this is just because I really like to have as close to an accurate budget as possible and to be able to really properly assess where our funds are going and make sure that it makes sense as far as the projects that we are working on. So I also recently kind of created a strategic plan for HREP that revolves around our mission statement and focuses on what outlets we use to reach this. So primarily that's our free beach program down at low tides during the main season. It also has to do with volunteer recruitment and retention, the school programs that we run, the ecotourism tour groups that we do, relationships with research groups, and then all of our regional, state, and national partnerships. So most of that isn't going to be in kind of its separate little categories, but the vast majority is going to fall under operating materials and supplies, as well as then down at the lower half, kind of at dues and subscriptions and below line items. So you see really one of the eliminations is of the membership program funding line, and then kind of shifting around funds from travel, lodging, and training that you can see there. Any questions on that?
You have a question?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I I think this sort of exhibits my ignorance, but I'm just trying to figure out why salaries and wages went up and HDL insurance went down.
Lori, do you have that?
Yeah, it's just because I don't really understand why, and I just really can't figure it out.
Well, there's an increase in salaries and wages probably due to we're reinstating COLAs this year. Last year, everyone deferred their COLA. So I'm pretty sure that's what the amount is, the difference here. The insurance. Okay, I think I know. So I think there was someone in the family plan who is not in the family plan anymore as a, okay.
So when you have such a small number of people, any change is a big change. Okay.
Yeah, and I think we had a vacancy when we did have a vacancy before Kelly got here. I always budget the worst case scenario at the family plan. So I think that's represented in that 89,000.
Great, thank you.
Or the 50,000, sorry.
Yeah, I'm just the lonely single person over here. That doesn't go in the record. Okay. All right, so the next thing that I was talking about as far as kind of big plans with HRAP is prioritizing kind of high yield efficacy. And what that means is I want to maximize our operations in a way that are efficient. This is both budget and as far as what we're doing in regards to education as well. And part of this is just kind of, how we can maximize with the most efficient use of funds, reaching the largest targeted audience with the highest level of impact possible to get our message out there. And in order to do that, actually, in order to know that we're achieving that, I have to be able to regularly assess and reflect on the program's operations and progress towards those measurable objectives that I've created for it. So this kind of translates to focusing primarily on the operations down at the beach and my ability to assess those. So the funding for that you're going to see is reflected in operating materials and supplies, which I have marginally increased by $500, and then down at grant expenses, which I have also increased a couple thousand. So in regards to the grant expense, these are going to be for grants that I will and hope to apply for and be able to receive. So it is accounted for elsewhere in the budget. But the primary purpose of these are to improve our ability to assess the success of the program, as well as work on a few kind of big picture problems that I think I'm seeing with not just the way that the program runs, but our inability in the past of really actually seeing measurable objectives of how well is our mission of protecting the rock down at the rock down at low tide actually translating as far as what it is that we're investing in it. So yeah, a lot of those grants are kind of going directly to improving this science communication area and our really personal involvement in scientific research. That I think HRAP is in a very unique position to work closely with different research agencies, even though we historically actually have not. We are also in this really unique position that is rich in potential of improving science communication. And this is just a gap that I most readily want to address. So I'm going to be putting some spendings in our materials and in our grants to work on this. So as someone who's a former researcher myself, I switched to the field of education because of the extremely poor and non-existing science communication that really exists from scientists to the public. And honestly, even being in a biomedical field, I've seen there was poor communication between scientists and medical professionals that were working in the same exact building. So it's a addressable problem that doesn't just exist here, it exists everywhere. And after this past year, I don't think I need to explain to anyone really how detrimental, difficult, and outright dangerous poor scientific communication can be. And so I want HREP to be a spot that can kind of get ahead of that and is going to invest in proper scientific communication with our community and with the people who visit our community. So that's where those grant funds are coming from. And it's also to partially support the Oregon State University Sea Grant Scholar Program that we've been doing now for the past 4 years. And I will be leveraging the support of those undergraduate students that we get to work on this kind of overlapping goal. I think, oh yeah, so then that comes to kind of personnel. So the personal expenses, they're actually relatively unchanged, but this is one that I have 14 very qualified seasonal interpreters that join us every year, and I like to budget competitive wages for them because the vast majority of these are recent college graduates who are extremely educated. It's also educators who are working for us during the summertime. And I think having a high level of expertise and professionalism just reflects really well on the city. And it ensures that we have staff that I know can confidently communicate all the scientific information that we want to communicate to our visitors. So then the last item though is down at the bottom, we have a capital outlay for a UTV. So this is really the very obvious known deficiency that we have. No one needs to be a biologist to recognize the importance of readily available bathroom access. But for the staff that is down at the beach every day, it's a component that has been ignored or just unspoken about, and an ad hoc approach has been taken. Our beach shifts at the longest are 9 hours long, and the average round trip time to walk from either City Hall or the public restroom back to the Rock is anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes. So when people need to leave the site from the Rock to use the restroom, a lot of times our volunteers will do that and they just won't return because it's inconvenient to have to add that time. So that negatively impacts their experiences and reduces the frequency that they might return to donate their time to us. For staff, when they experience high visitor counts, they are reluctant to do this because they don't like to abandon their job or make them feel like their coworkers are having to overwork when they just have to use the restroom. So a lot of my staff I know knowingly dehydrates themselves, and I consider this to be a unsafe and unhealthy workplace practice, but it's one that is very readily fixable. It takes about 5 minutes to drive our truck from the Rock to the restroom. Add on another 5 minutes if we have to actually pack up the materials that are currently out, since that truck is where we work out of on the site. And then a little longer time for if we're navigating through large crowds. And in contrast though, we could get just a beach safe UTV vehicle that will be able to navigate through the summer crowds in a safer way than a large pickup truck does. And it's less disruptive to our main operations since we work out of the truck while we're on site. And it's just a way to regularly schedule restroom trips for our staff and volunteers that I think they really need. So I've budgeted in $12,000 for the purchase of that, because after 36 years of operating, I think it's time that they have readily available bathroom access. The other benefit from this is we can use the UTV for animal rescues. We get an average of 16 bird rescue calls a month during the summer season. And we've already, at this point, the very start of the summer, have already had 5. So that's kind of the end of our budget. If there's any questions from that part?
Good job.
Nope, thank you. Okay, now Lori and Bruce.
What we have here. Page 29. Maintenance, okay, so,
I'm sorry, Lori, I will take this one. I didn't see which one it was. The Building maintenance, we have no dedicated staff to the building maintenance. A major facility is this one. We also have facilities that for the public works yard. But, pardon? Yeah, okay. But anyway, what is happening here is that we've not spent a lot of money, especially on this building. And so you can see that down on the capital side, there's $100,000. That was to address, or still is to address things that are going on in the police department that are just half the fixes. This number was originally $500,000, thinking of what it would take to do the capital projects that are necessary to put a Band-Aid on the problems that we have in that police department. The police staff, and Jason came to us and said, because we were talking about using portables, to either move City Hall into portables and police station taking over the rest of this building, or moving the police into portables. They said, as long as you're pursuing a City Hall and you can take care of the air quality problems, then you don't have to fix all the other things that, you know, we've been talking about all this time. So that's why this number is down to 100,000. I made my commitment that we would fix those things, and, you know, we'd be pursuing a City Hall. So hopefully we'll continue that. But that's where the numbers are coming in. So what we'll be looking to do is to move carpet, ceiling tiles, you know, all these things that have been contaminated over time. And also make sure that we've got a good, not an ad hoc air conditioning system that exits air out of places where we're working on biological or drug evidence, that the evidence room is separated so that the air is going out and not mixing, those kind of things. So that's what's included in the air quality, which is the 100,000. Don't move forward. I think that we need to be looking at doing the larger project, which again is an expensive Band-Aid. Any questions on facility maintenance?
And to community programs. Budget is for our community service grants that we give out annually. Summer concerts, the Cannon Beach Library. I emailed you all Phyllis's request for funds this year and for your review. She has asked that we contribute 18,000 this year, so that is what is in the budget. We expend money from this department for Tolovana Hall and landscaping. The first line is more maintenance type things. We just renewed the Sunset Empire Transportation Shuttle subsidy last night at our council meeting. The contract, the first year, the contract will be identical to what we have right now. And then in the second year, the hourly rate increases $2. So that's 66,000. And then Bruce also mentioned the public art project of 25,000 under capital outlay. And so this is $214,500 for next budget year.
The community services grant program, that's the one that is administered, or the recommendations are made through the Parks and Community Services Committee.
Just to be clear, the Tolovana landscaping is for Tolovana, not that over at the end. Okay.
Put that word in there. Okay. Next item is the farmers market.
You go ahead.
So, Celia, gave us her budget. And, well, I did the personnel services cost for her. That's 36,398, and her total program costs and materials and services is 10,373, which is actually less than current year budget. And so there's a modest increase here for the farmer's market budget. And we're budgeting $46,171 to run that program.
And they are monitoring the ability to operate a farmer's market in this environment. One time they were talking about July, things started to look better. They moved it back to June. We're in high risk again. So we talked about it. They're just going to stay as flexible as they can and trying to go ahead and set a date. Council, it was actually council's idea to reduce the cost of a business license to try to get as many people here as we can. It normally is 75. Staff was recommending 25. Council approved 10 just to get people here. So it's not that's how we're trying to support. But you're very conscientious about the health issues associated with it and are just kind of going day to day on their decision on when and if to open.
Okay. Okay, moving on to municipal court, page 33.
Before I go, the merchandise aspect of farmer's market, I'm noticing on the revenue page 27, farmer's market sales, that's totally on their revenue or on their merchandise, correct? Nothing else in farmer's market that is old.
Farmers market sales for the t-shirts and
Okay, that's what I'm asking.
that's it. Yeah, just whatever Philomena is selling at the market.
Okay.
If a department is out there like HRAP, they're out there for education purposes.
I'm just kind of surprised that the cost for goods is so much more than the return. That's retail.
Probably keeps a little bit of an inventory too.
Yeah.
Carol's got a question.
Carol.
On the farmer's market, so if it does start later in the season, like midsummer, will the budget just be adjusted accordingly, or is this going to just stay the same?
Pretty much, well, merchandise might be different. The biggest expenditure is Philomena's time. She is here planning, for the event. And so there's really a relatively short time that she is here for actually what's going on outside. The rest of the year is planning.
Okay.
I don't think you'll see a big difference.
Thanks.
And move on to municipal court, page 33. Just run out of the finance department, utilizing my assistant finance director as staff and court clerk. The cost to the materials and services costs are down this year because we realized that we really weren't utilizing legal services of the prosecutor as much as we anticipated. And you can see the history is reflecting that on the left margin there. So we revised this downward for next year. So the budget is actually less than COVID year. So total expenditures for next year, $42,901. And as I mentioned, the revenue side of court is expenditures. So that's a good sign. We're actually getting net earnings from this municipal court program.
hope all of you have had the chance to meet Rick Hudson. He's our emergency manager.
Hi, Rick. How are you?
Load that up, Rusty. What I'm gonna talk about today,
Oh, I'm sorry. You thought you were Jeff with your PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay, Jeff.
what I'm gonna talk about today has a lot to do with infrastructure. So I wanted to show you guys some photographs of the infrastructure that we're utilizing, or else it's just numbers and words. So I've shown a lot of this to the council, and I want to make this super brief. So I've only got like 3 slides here, but it'll help describe what my budget's proposing for us. When I was going through the budget this year, I was, pretty stressed out trying to figure out the best way to put everything into perspective and be reasonable and rational. And I have one powerful page. And then I realized that Karen has 20. So I'm not really sure what I was worried about, other than that just humbles me. Like, she had 20. Okay. So what I really want to talk about here is when I met, what's that? I met everybody last year, and I really talked about a 3-year budget cycle for building up this program. And it's a lot of infrastructure. And so the costs are heavy in the front, and that's much less on the back end there. And in 2020, as I was gearing up for that process, we really had a priority interrupt of building this program to get a good jump on everything. And it was a pretty big priority interrupt with COVID. One thing that happened positively out of that is it switched gears from just infrastructure to all of the IT things and the things that we were building, including the communications plan. So we started building a communications program, and the communications program is bold. I would like it to look that big. It's not going to be that big. That's a big tower. But in general, we're building a radio system for this area that it never really had before. We've improved our cellular capability for this area, including all the buildings that are public buildings. We've right-sized the satellite program and made it to be something that's appropriate for what you're paying for. And we've also improved the internet capability for emergency use in the future. And so that all happened over this year, and it's ongoing as we build this system. And we've also had a lot of partnerships with outside agencies that we've been successful to really almost cross the finish line with everything, but it's really moving forward. KMUN, the Medical Reserve Corps with their radio system. And so the partnerships that we've built has been really
Talk
positive.
about KMUN, that one.
KMUN, we've been, the city's been interested in partnering with them, and they always have for the past, I'd say 20 plus years. And we actually have crossed the finish line with getting our permits done at the North Tank site. And we are in the process of working with Pacific Power to actually get an antenna up at that site. And we're within months of having that thing up and running. And just to have their signal come over the hill from where they're broadcasting, and then broadcast emergency signal for everybody in this area and south of us is a really good accomplishment for us. So just to kind of make some of those partnerships happen has been great.
But on top of that, we can use, as I understand it, we can use that site to transmit in an emergency.
Yes, that's just an alternate for us. We can go to that site and actually open up the cabinet and communicate with on their broadcast when it's in an emergency mode. So that's another alternate for us in the future. Next slide, please. The cache site development. The cache sites that we've been building up over the past year, we've doubled the capacity of these cache sites. These cache sites have been around for about 10 years. And we've had some great strides in improving them, but we've also realized that there's some maintenance issues here. When you have these sites and you start putting infrastructure into them and you start putting supplies in there, you also have to maintain them. In the past, these buildings have not had power, and they've had some mold issues and some maintenance and some challenges. And so my goal in the future over this next year with this budget, and that's where some of the numbers come from, is to get power to these sites so we can properly maintain these sites and how usable those will be in an emergency. We've improved our relationship with Red Cross and made it safer for those trailers to be there and modify that inventory. And like I said before, we doubled the capacity of these site locations. And last year I was fortunate enough to write a grant and be successful for almost $35,000 worth of food to put in these sites. And they're in there right now. So things are moving forward to get those sites more bolstered for more resiliency. But the challenge really comes down to is you have to maintain them. So I'll get to that in the last slide here. The EOC, Emergency Operations Centers, as we're sitting in our primary emergency operations center right now, they're multi-use buildings. We're enjoying the technology of these buildings, and we have ever since COVID. COVID made us basically start moving in this direction quickly. And I think it's been something that we've utilized almost every day. I do know that the council has been using this building a lot and this technology, and I'm hoping that it's working for everybody. We also have an emergency operations center at the Public Works Yard, and it's a multi-use building, and we use it for training as well. And we're still building up these sites. They're physically here, but we're still adding radios and some other technology to it, and we'll be doing that over this next year. That really gets down to the next slide here, and this is where we were talking about earlier, and I've got to appreciate what Sharon had to say earlier about committing to programs. And what I've learned over the grant funding is this. Especially when it comes to the federal grants for public safety and any kind of homeland security or anything like that, you have a better chance of getting these grants and getting funding if your city is committed to using them. And in order to do that, one of the most important things is to show a previous budget line that had that funding source or something that was built. It shows a commitment to it that you can actually use those funds and a future commitment that you're going to enact on them and maintain them. And it's real important. All the stuff I've learned about grants recently, and then all the things that have happened new over the COVID, is they want shovel-ready grants. And so one of the most important things is we started getting bids and we started networking to get these things to happen, to actually put a price tag on them. And what you see up there are line 3 and 4 is the Homeland Security grant that I just submitted the other day through Clatsop County's Emergency Management for $30,000. And that $30,000 for the top 2 lines, if you add them together, it's a little over $30,000. That's simply for sanitation for the cache sites. So when you're putting things together for even a mass care cache site, that's a big expense for the city, but we have a chance to really get a good grant out of that. The other health preparedness organization and the NACCHO grant, our MRCs and CERT teams do such a great job of volunteering that we have the ability to put grants and get them some funding, and they put in for those. They actually put in for a lot of those things and get them routinely. So it's important to realize that since they've already started that path of getting grants and using it, that helps them get more grants in the future. And then the last one on the American Rescue Plan of $87,000, that's basically put in there to put power to the cache sites. And the chance for us for getting them, I hope, is good. We definitely have a good reason for having them, but if it's in a budget line, you have a better chance of awarding it and it's shovel ready. So we do have bids ready for that, and we're partnering with our local excavators and Pacific Power to get those bids, and they are a shovel ready project. So when you guys look at my one sheet of a budget here, a lot of those things are in there, and it's hard to discern where those big numbers are coming from, but they have a lot to do with this grant process. Any questions about the grants? And as you see in here, I've been working with the department heads behind me, and they've had a lot of challenges over the years of getting grants. Am I right? And recently we've been scoring big hits, and it has to do with the quality of the people in here that are doing it, but it is a full-time job doing grant writing. It takes a lot of work, but it's worth it. It's worth it. Go ahead and clean it up now.
Yeah, Alicia's got a question for you.
Okay, great.
My question is just, do we also have money for generators? I know you're going to put power up there, but will that include some kind of generators after the emergency maybe?
The Health Preparedness Organization just gave us 3 brand new generators worth $5,400, and it's at our public works yard right now. There is more generators that we need to purchase, that because these are smaller generators. They're not the type of generators that go for public works that are at these sites. They're smaller, they're portable. But that is other generators that I have in the fund or the budget. We already have generators here to help us. Each site hopefully will have at least 3 generators. And they're portable. So if we have ability to move into the forest or move to a different location, we can bring power to there. And one of the most important things about getting power to the sites is it helps maintains the buildings, but it also maintains security of the buildings. We've had 3 break-ins this past year at our cache sites. And as we put more money and more supplies into these buildings, the risk of them being looted or destroyed is very high. And they're soft targets. So my goal is to make them a harder target and more secure, and getting power there is paramount, is critical, but having backup generators inside of them is important. Let's say we do lose power at those sites due to a catastrophic event. We plumb those sites to where you can just put a portable generator in there and then you have power at the site.
So is that where the money is going from the American Rescue, is power for all 3 sites?
That's correct. And it's in the current budget here. So even if we don't get the American Rescue Plan, then we can prioritize which one we're going to do first, and we can march that out. And we can basically say, okay, how do we want to actually accomplish that ourselves?
Why is it costing $87,000?
That's all 3 sites. That's Talavana, Echo, and Oscar sites. And that's actually a pretty reasonable amount of money for getting sites to remote locations at 3 different places in the city.
This is not a convenient, easy job. There's some work to get the power there.
Will that be underground power?
Yes, all 3 of them have the ability to get underground power there.
Do you have security cameras there?
Well, we do have security cameras there, and right now, unfortunately, they're just battery operated and they're kind of remotely located. So the goal is to get power out there to we have more security to where the law enforcement can even monitor that from a screen inside their offices or their vehicles. That's the goal.
We're working on it.
We're still working on that. But that's the plan. Anybody else have any questions about? Did you guys need me to go through specific sections of the budget for you at all? Get a lot.
Just count on Jason to lower the level of the conversation.
Well, I'm getting hungry for nachos, frankly.
And we got to thank our MRC and Lila Wickham, the volunteer who runs that program. She does such a fantastic job, and she is a grant machine, and she's really good about getting those resources.
Right.
Well,
The team that supports the city, including volunteers and staff and council and committees, it's a very strong team. This is not normal.
to echo that, over 40% of the volunteers for the entire Clatsop County that helped with the vaccination all came from this city. 40%.
Wow.
Incredible. They have over 11,000 hours if you were to build their hours out of money that they volunteered for vaccinations. The CERT team alone from the city passed out 13,000 masks to city community members over a 1-year period of time. They volunteered their time almost 1 or 2 times a month. It's incredible.
That'd be interesting to put in the city bulletin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's over $20,000 if you would have added it up just to pay someone minimum wage to do that. And they did that free of charge with their own time. And it's pretty amazing to be able to support them and give them the resources they need to do something in any kind of crisis. And they've been responding remarkably.
There's also a group of ham operators that, I think they did provide some assistance in 07 and all. But right now, the city is a partner of theirs. The city funds them. We have a contract with them. And that's part of the, I think it's for you to provide the web over radio signal.
That's correct. The Sunset Empire Radio Club, they are a 501(c)(3), and we do give them a donation every year to make sure that they still have funding to bring these services into us. And then they give me technical experience for free, basically. And then we do give them resources if they're doing program and actual labor. And the cost of that type of skill set to come in and help us build these programs, we couldn't touch it in the open market.
Hmm.
And they're volunteering that time, and they're basically just charging for equipment and whatever they have to keep the machine running.
They're charging for equipment and also just based on some physical capabilities, Rick has to agree to be the one that climbs the tower.
They're much better at it than I am, but they do sign me up for some of these things.
The other thing is that volunteer hours are another factor for helping the grant writing.
Yep.
So, the fact that we have such a healthy emergency management budget also reinforces the fact that people want to volunteer. They want to be part of that. So to know that they're supported by the city helps them support us. Kind of a full cycle.
Yeah, it's really good to be a part of. Any other questions for me?
Well, just one comment, when Sharon and I were up getting our shots. It was really nice to see Lila and Bob up there. They were so friendly and it made it a nice experience.
It's good. So you guys got to see it, experience it firsthand. And I would go up to the cash or the vaccination sites as often as I could. I tried to get at least one of them each week. And I saw at least 3 to 5 people that I've been working with every day, just there doing it. Answering phones there. I'd call them on the phone to ask them some questions of new stuff going on. And it's someone I recognize on the phone.
You wouldn't be liking that as much when you hear the story that Bob told me when this was all getting ramped up last spring, because he told me that I haven't given a shot for 20 years.
Great job.
He was pretty excited.
Yeah.
He dressed up. He looks like he was going out and he was doing really good.
You had no idea how much he missed it. Yeah.
That's right.
Felt so good. Coke.
Yeah. I am a little disappointed that I didn't put the Blackhawk in my budget. I can't believe I haven't heard of it being requested.
You guys aren't communicating.
I know. Well, I expected it to happen, but
Okay.
It's in mine. It's called a new dump truck.
Fly as high, but.
thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
Okay, back to Bruce and Lori.
Tourism and Arts Fund. Page 52. There's a carry forward. We're budgeting an estimated amount of 350,000 plus 50,000. And if you look back to page 15, those two numbers together are reflected here in the chart. As we looked at earlier with the general fund, that amounts to $400,799. That's based on the 2019 actual room tax received, which is our estimate for next year. Also, the interfund loan payment that will be made from the Clatsop County TRT fund shown coming in there. And that totals resources 539,136. TAF award is the same as the budget estimate. Typically, the committee does not expend that full amount. As you can see, I think they're trying to build a fund balance in this fund. So I wouldn't expect that full amount to be spent based on historical patterns. There's an ending fund balance of $138,337.
And the exposure that these folks have to the business community has really been positive for the city. One of the recommendations they made was to supply power to the band shell, because when they talked, if the band shell had power, we could do this. So they came to us, and then the council funded it. And you may have heard, but this year we're having the Buskers Happy Hour every other Thursday, where it'll be a local band, and they will come and they will be only funded from tips. So there's no cost to the city. And Coasters will be doing every weekend a play, either Shakespeare on Friday and Saturday night, or a mystery on Friday and Saturday night, every other weekend. So it was just out of an idea that they approached us saying, this is what, this is what we're hearing. Can this be done? So another part of the extended family supporting everything.
Moving on to transient room tax fund. 55. We had a discussion last night at our council meeting regarding this fund. Did a supplemental budget on it. I would like to recommend that I bring back a change to this budget at our next meeting. You can see here, we're budgeting the same amount of estimated revenues here, the 499,000 something.
444.
400, 799. And then we need to change this line here that says contract amount not to exceed, because that is inaccurate at this point. And I would like to budget a larger amount for the revenue estimate and the materials and services spending. Because what happens is the amount that we collect in this fund is paid to the chamber. So whatever we collect, we pay out in the same period. What's problematic is that when we budget, we're budgeting, conservatively. We don't want to over budget revenues. So usually we get more money than what we're expecting. So if we budget the same amount as that we're going to pay out that equals our budgeted revenue, we're going to get into trouble with Oregon budget law, which says if you're going to budget $444,000 as your, and that's your spending authority that council has given you, you're limited to that. So in order to fix this problem, we need to have a bigger number here. And in order to get that, you've got to estimate your revenues higher. So I'd like to bring back a change to this budget based on our discussions last night at council, if that's okay with you.
So if actuals come in lower, it's not a big deal?
No.
Oh. That's one of those weird.
But that doesn't happen typically.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you're in a COVID year or something.
I mean, COVID.
Appropriate.
Yeah, and what happened, I mean, Lori, I think you referred to it as a problem. There was a misunderstanding or as far as the contract. And so we worked that out with the chamber, council approved the change. And what Lori's saying is let's go ahead and reflect that because we did change the resolution last night.
You'll correct several of these exhibits. Those numbers, revenue side as well as the expense side.
Yeah, both of these will go up.
Mike's saying there's any place that is impacted too, but I know you'll do that.
Yeah, well, maybe my chart,
Yeah.
that will change. Is that maybe what you're referring to? Yeah, I'll update everything that changes. Okay, going to page 56. 58. Cover this one.
Oh. Now it's my rule.
It's your-
These are the funds that are coming in from Clatsop. You can see how the collections come in. That we're going to be anticipating a transfer of about $388,000 to, we have several expenses to be paid. One is the loan, another is whatever's going to happen from the roof. And again, the roof number could be, lower, hopefully not higher. And then the 34,000 is the payment to tap for the loan. Any questions?
Bruce, I have a question kind of back on the roof. Is this an estimate with the more expensive shake or shingle?
We don't have an estimate. What happened is they did a study
Right.
of all the things that need to be done, and we kind of pulled out the two costs for the roof and then the cost for the roof seismic. And it was in the neighborhood of this. It may change because they're gonna do it all at once. It may make it more.
But did you use the cost for the roof? Did you use the figures for the shakes or the composition?
We, in our minds,
Higher end, so that,
we did go higher end,
okay,
but we didn't really have hard costs. What they did is
No.
they did the presentation. is
exactly.
this will cost $4
I
million.
saw the
Times as much.
presentation, so,
Yeah.
you know,
Yes,
you don't really have,
we budgeted for what our desired outcome.
okay. Okay, because I just want to make sure that, I mean, I like you budgeting high
Mhm.
rather than low, and then
Yeah.
like you said before, so.
Depends. Some we want low, some we want high.
To the debt service fund. 1-3. Okay, so, balance of 65,000, estimated property taxes. 90,091, and this is an actual levy. So this is an amount that you tell the county that you want to be paid. And it also includes amounts for non-collections at the through the county. So it's got like a little bit of allowance for unpaid taxes in it. And I use the figure from the county. They track it every year, what their uncollectible percentage is. And so I just use the most recent uncollectible percentage to apply to that. So this is what we will realize. I'm going to levy more to allow for that. And you'll see that in your final action with the budget committee that I draw for you to approve the proposed budget. And prior taxes, again, I just look at the historical trends on collections there. So that's 9,000. And we discussed the transfer from the general fund of $192,134 earlier. So that gives us total resources of $654,825, which pays our debt service, principal and interest. As you can see, those are the scheduled payments for next budget year. And again, the 2027 GO bond is related to the Forest Reserve. And the 2012 GO bond is that's paid off. 2025 is related to the wastewater lagoons. And then that leaves us with an estimated ending fund balance of $20,000.
Question?
Okay, now looking at administrative services fund. Executive budget is first. That's page 120. You want to take that, Bruce?
Right.
Huh? Okay, this is where we pay for staff, city manager and city recorder. You can see the total resources coming in are those the share of what we charge out. So we're collecting from the other funds essentially. And personnel services, we have 2 FTE, like I just mentioned. That's $376,082. Materials and services are budgeted at $185,750. Maybe the highlight here is about this, exactly the same. Contractual services have gone up, and do you know what that is?
It's the record scanning.
Yeah,
Oh, record scanning, okay. So,
thanks, Jim.
we have COLA in here, and PERS went up, of course. And that's that program. You're the sleeper.
Mm-hmm, great.
You want to move on to finance?
Want me to take it? Just kidding.
Sure.
That's one of them.
Okay, resources, just like I described, executive, same principle. We have 3.53 FTE in my finance department. And personnel costs are $439,985. Materials and services went up about 10,000 this year for next year's budget. I think travel and lodging. That again next year. It's really nice to go to conferences and network with my fellow finance directors. I really do miss it a lot. I do really learn a lot when I go to those things. Mostly, my friends in Warrenton, they're there. And so it's a good opportunity to talk about what you do at work and improve some things. So other than that, I don't see our telephone. Oh, we all got cell phones this year. So budgeting for maintaining those, my staff. So that's the big increase there.
From a record standpoint, we really don't want people using their own phones to create public records.
Exactly. What else? I think those are the highlights of the finance department. Rusty, are you prepared to talk about IT at all?
I can. Not a lot of changes on the IT budget from last year. We're pretty much in maintenance mode. So the majority of my budget is software services that we use for the city, like the finance software. So there's a lot of maintenance contracts that are in there. Our mail system. So our mail is housed off-site. So we're using Microsoft Office to use that. The internet expense for the city hall location comes out of my budget. And I actually redid the contract on that, what, 2-3 months ago, like that. We had a slight reduction in the cost in that one and with a little bit better service. Trying to think of what else is in my budget. I'm not planning on any major things this year, just doing some minor software upgrades that we need to do for our servers. Keep them in support. And then the majority of my time pretty much gets used assisting all the other departments, and they build in the budget into their line items for expenses that they would want to put in. So I think that's pretty much all I have for IT. Any questions?
Steve and Rick in particular, and I know Jason have gone through a number of our contracts, communications contracts, those kinds of things, and just found that we were being overcharged in so many areas and got it right-sized and improved the programs we were paying for. We weren't necessarily buying the best.
Yeah, we had a lot of,
made a big change.
we had a lot of internet and phone contracts that hadn't been checked in quite some time that we saved a pretty good chunk of money on.
Good. Congratulations.
Do that for us, personal.
Takes a lot of time and effort. I'll tell you.
You know, we could all use them.
I could use it. I could use it.
Rusty.com.
Okay. Central services is on page 123. This is where we pay for things that are kind of all related, things that aren't exactly attributable to finance are here, like insurance. That's kind of an overarching cost that we charge out, and insurance has gone up. Budgeted 169,000. Did we mention that our health insurance is staying flat this year? I don't remember saying that.
I don't think we said it, but that's pretty good.
It's pretty darn good, yeah.
Incredible.
But our general liability and property did go up. So we network with CIS, the County Insurance Services. And we provide our health insurance and property, general liability. So even though health insurance stayed flat, we are seeing an increase for that other coverages. So
And if I can, there's one that I put into the insurance this year. When we did the comparisons for other municipalities, for police and for general employees, our life insurance program was at 20,000 and everybody else was at 50 or 60. So I asked Lori to do some research on, how much it would cost to do an increase. And, life insurance is, a lot of family people here and all that is is a good benefit to have. And we found we could increase every employee to $100,000 for around $7,000 a year additional. And so that is incorporated in here, and that would be, made part of the overall benefit program.
That's wonderful.
Great.
Yeah, but $7,000 to go ahead and cover everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure it'll be appreciated.
Doesn't include council.
I think it's paid employees. Start, you could change, no.
Hey,
Hey, what a concept.
I've been here for 4 hours.
why didn't insurance go up?
Zero.
Afraid to ask, why didn't insurance go up? That's shocking.
Health during
Yeah.
COVID.
You're part of a consortium. And my guess is that, they've got a reserve and they knew everybody was having a tough year. So they probably, made a contribution or some sort of a balancing
Yeah,
effort.
brought it down.
And also, I think they did make some contractual changes that probably helped them financially. For example, we really do have very good insurance. And but they did make a change in the drug side, but it's not huge, but it probably did make a difference. So a minor change plus potentially some reserves would allow it to go ahead and stay the same. But also, we've had good experience in our regular insurance. When I get the reports, we have very few accidents. And it's so
Great,
very good.
great.
Very high emphasis on safety.
Okay, page 24, we'll go over next week. And now we can move on to the RV park. Seven. Okay, I touched on this a little bit earlier. Cape Lodging always gives us their budget every year. Their projections are, and I base this budget on the data they give me. And so the fund balance carryover is very good, kind of in the same situation as our other room tax results. The RV park did very well when we thought maybe it wouldn't. And so you're seeing that in the beginning fund balance carryover. because we got higher revenue than we expected. The RV park revenue estimate is based on what Escape Lodging has given me. So we have total resources of $3,042,491 going into next year. A small amount of personnel services charged to this fund, $1,466. Materials and services, you can see here, we do charge admin services. And we have insurance. This is our pollution liability coverage that's related to the fuel station. Facility maintenance, that's a number that I put in just for things that might come up. The RV park overhead number is based on Escape Lodging's estimates given to me. And then the management fee is, we pay them a monthly amount, a fixed fee, and then we pay them a percentage of net profits at the end of the year. So that is about 90,000 is my estimate for next year. Bruce talked about the capital outlay item, the cart that we want to purchase for them. That's in there at 10,000. And then I briefly discussed the transfer to the general fund, 250,000. We're also doing the same amount to the RV park reserve. That's how we're going to fund the paving at some point. So transfers are 500,000 and contingency is at 20%, 420,000. And that leaves expenditures at 3,025,000. And we still have a little bit of an ending fund balance as a result of 17,483.
Can you explain what the RV park overhead is?
That's the amount that, yeah, that's a term. Yeah, I don't know about the terminology where that originated from. Those are all the expenses that Escape Lodging has that we pay them so that they can, so we actually pay them because they give us all their invoices to run the place. And so we send that money back over to them so they can pay the bills.
Do you know what kind of bills we're talking about? Usual electricity and
Operational staffing,
and,
you know, operating costs,
Fuel.
purchases of fuel, grocery purchases of grocery items for the store, you know, maintenance of the grounds, just everything it takes to operate the park.
so does that mean that we get an income then of about 500,000?
Yeah. Maybe 450. Which is wrapped up in contingency and ending fund balance. That's pretty much what's left over as long as we don't use contingency next year, then you'll have, based on the estimates, of course, that's what you would expect to see as a carryover to the next year.
Phyllis? I've got a question. I'm trying to figure out if we don't have any FTE, why we have PERS and Social Security and unemployment. Is that because, and you know, I don't quite understand where that comes from. There's no salary and wages. Why do we have PERS and Social Security?
Well, this is for overtime and it's for mostly Public Works. If they have to send someone out and it'll be overtime usually. And so sometimes they respond to the RV park for certain things. So it's overtime. It's not really a person.
So but it's a city employee, not a park employee.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what was confusing to me. It's the city employee that's doing it. Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
So why isn't the RV park part of the 10 general fund budgeted revenue streams? It's not part of the general fund?
Correct. All right, move on to the RV Park Reserve Fund. some money in there for a little while. Well, we moved money in 2019-20. We actually made a transfer of $100,000, so $115,923 in there for a couple years. That's the beginning fund balance that you see over here in 2021-22. And then the RV park fund transfer in is shown for resources of $365,922. And then we've allotted $300,000 for paving the park grounds. We put unallocated project in here of $65,922 to make up the difference. So that total capital outlay equals the total resources. And then you have no ending fund balance or reserve for future expenditure. We're actually the paving the park grounds, we estimated 300,000, and then we just had that little bit left over that we could use if this came in over whatnot.
Any questions on that? Okay,
We're gonna do Karen's 20 pages tomorrow, next meeting,
Wednesday, right?
next Wednesday.
next Wednesday. Okay, that was going to be next.
What we wanted to accomplish today, and we appreciate everybody staying,
Ah, good progress.
the leader. Kept us so close to on time. We'd never been this close.
We have good of the order on here? No, we don't have to do that.
Can.
You can always add it.
Yeah.
You're the chair.
Does anyone?
You can also adjourn.
Does anyone want to add anything for a good of the order? No, we'll just see you next Wednesday.
Yes. Thank you all for being here.
Meeting's adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.